This is beautiful wine.
Which one are you drinking, and who was that?
Oh, I better learn the name of them. Bring the bottles over, Debbie.
Tell me your name again, sir.
And it was this one.
There.
Debbie's husband. What's your name?
Dan.
Dan. Got it. Yeah, that's the Fungoli.
Fungoli?
Fungoli, yeah, or Fungoli.
Fungoli.
Fungoli, I think.
Well, isn't Fungoli a bean? Fungolis are beans, right?
Fagioli.
Salvo, do you want to pipe in here?
I'm not sure.
I think he's talking about fagioli, like pasta fagioli.
Yeah.
It could be fagioli, but it's in a dialect that I don't know.
Salvo's not Italian; he's Sicilian, so you'll have to. You'll have to.
Also,
He would be happy I made the distinction. I promise.
Best half.
We're gonna do it a couple of more minutes, and we're gonna get started.
And Terry was supposed to. Well, I wasn't really ever supposed to.
I like the eyes of the canine wine taster.
Oh no.
Who's this? What's that?
I love the eyes of the canine wine taster.
My best friend's back home.
Down at the bottom. A gentleman, it says Melissa.
Where are we talking about? On the bottle?
Bottom.
Moxie.
Maxie.
Oh, there.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the picture.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
The sweet doggy.
Maybe she thinks that.
no, there one on that bottle.
No, it's a crust.
Anybody drink any good wines lately? While we wait for Pietro.
We had a good wine.
What do you got there?
Provenance Malbec
Nice.
from Napa Valley.
Oh, the name of the winery was Provenance. A Malbec.
Yeah, Provenance is a winery in the Rutherford district.
Ah, I thought you meant Provence in France, Malbec. Wow, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is Provenance.
Provenance.
The authenticity of it.
Yes. An important thing when it gets to old wine. How was it?
We really like all of their wines, and it's a California Malbec, not an Argentinian Malbec.
Right.
They do a really good job with it.
And we knew the winemaker there for years, so there's a certain affection for what that property can produce, and we're very happy with everything they do. Their star is a Hewitt wine from a district there in Rutherford, and it has that Rutherford dust to it.
Yeah.
And we buy it every year so we can see the changes in it and do vertical tastings and all of that. So nice.
Isn't that the
I think it's so important to get to know if you find a wine that you like, to really get to know it by tasting it year in, year out. It teaches you about tasting and just overall appreciation of wine, I think, in general. Yeah. Cool. There he is.
I think he mixed up the wine, Paul, so you didn't have that. You forgot which wine you poured in your glass.
What's that?
Franco forgot which wine he poured in which glass.
Whichever one is stinkier is the one from Umbria. Whichever the one smells like, I mean, I could come up with some really interesting things, but I'm gonna wait for us to taste it together. But it's pretty stinky. It should scream at you. The one from Italy, it should say, "Whoa!" Pietro, welcome, man. Nice to see you.
yeah, good to see you too. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late. I couldn't find the link.
Don't worry about it. We have a nice group here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. All right, I think we're gonna get started. Pietro, do you have the Fongoli open?
Yes, I do.
What do you think, man?
I think it's changed a lot.
Yeah, it needs some time.
Definitely pretty reduced when you first open it, but it's really opening up.
Yeah, it needs to breathe and blow off and kind of do its thing a little bit. Cool.
And there's also salad.
All right, folks. Well, I know a lot of you have amazing meals in front of you. I texted Alessandro. Hopefully he's just getting back home from delivery, so he'll pop on and say hello. Yeah, we thank you all for coming. This is going to be a fun night, talking about a single varietal, both in the old world and the new world. It's an exciting grape, definitely one of Italy's most distinct, it really kind of sits on its own. It's got characteristics of many grapes, but it really stands on its own. So yeah, to those of you who are new, welcome. My name's Paul. I'm a sommelier and renegade retailer of a little store called Bottivino that's all online and serving Bay Area and beyond. And I'm Pietro is from Prima Materia Winery, and he and I got together a little while ago to kind of explore the native grapes of Italy in the New World. And Pietro has some awesome wines coming from an area up in Lake County, north of us, north of Napa and Sonoma, and you're going to hear all about them tonight and see maps and things about where he has his grapes. And so I urge you to check out his wines if you're unfamiliar. You're certainly going to taste them tonight, and we're going to start you off with a bang if this is the first time you've ever had Prima Materia wines. Sagrantino's a punch. All right, cool. What do you think, Pietro? How do you want to do this?
Do you want to go first with some background in the motherland?
We talk about Italy a little bit?
Yeah.
All right. I'm only going to talk a little bit because I want to get to the vineyard. I'm curious about Sagrantino. All right, folks. So I'm going to talk at everyone just for a few minutes about where Sagrantino comes in Italy. If I could request that everyone puts themselves on mute, I would appreciate it very much. Because I'm super ADD.
Really?
Okay.
I think I can actually do it myself. Yeah, there we are. Thank you.
Is this, was that the fourth? I don't think that.
Just a moment. I'm just going to go through and mute a few, just if that's all right. Thank you. All right. Just a moment. Bear with me. All right, folks. So Sagrantino in Italy. So Sagrantino itself, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of the where that name comes from and just a touch about the history of it. But in Italy, we are smack dab in central Italy. We couldn't get more central in Italy if we tried. Umbria is right smack dab in the middle. As you can see, I've circled it here on the map. Gonna come a little bit closer to Umbria. You see it sandwiched between Toscana to its west. You've got La Marche to its north, and then Abruzzo and down Lazio to its southwest, and so on and so forth. And Umbria is the only region in Italy that is entirely landlocked, and it doesn't see any of the Mediterranean. That doesn't mean that it doesn't see the effects of the Mediterranean, the Adriatic to its east and the Turanian to its west, but it really is kind of packed in there. And a lot of those, border areas, certainly the one around Umbria, the one around Lazio and Rome, which is down on that southwestern corner, is very mountainous. So we're looking at the Apennino mountain range, really kind of isolating this area. And when it comes to the Sagrantino grape, we're going to talk tonight mostly about Montefalco, this purple area right in the center here. But just to give you a very brief kind of snapshot of Umbria, it's a special place. It's a place that has some history to it. But it really, when it comes to quality winemaking, we're talking about the 1970s to 1980s is when Umbria really began to take off. But just in terms of kind of consuming the region as a whole, if you were to walk away with knowing the major areas in this kind of crazy map, I would turn your attention to Orvieto down here to the southwest. Orvieto right out kind of along the border region of Lazio, and right across this border you start getting into some really interesting territory. But Orvieto was mentioned back in the Roman times with Pliny the Elder in his scriptures. Orvieto wines are very famous in the Roman times. But really dropped off, and I think for years were known for their inexpensive white blends, kind of cheap and fun and easy and uncomplicated, until the Cortarello brothers, Riccardo and Renzo, came along in the 1990s and created Castello della Sala, and really just rose, really brought the quality of expression of those wines up with their Cervallo della Sala and Muffato and those wines. And they're really beautiful if you're able to get to taste them. They're mostly featuring a native grape from Orvieto, which played a minor part in a lot of those cheap wines. And the grape was called Gracchetto. And with those guys, they made it all on its own, and it's opulent and beautiful. Moving north, Torgiano is probably when it comes to quality winemaking, was the capital for many years of Umbria of quality winemaking. And to speak of Torgiano Rosso wines is to speak of a gentleman by the name of Lungarotti, who in the 1970s was the very first, in 1977 actually, excuse me, in 1968, was the very first to create the DOC in Umbria of Torgiano, and the very first DOC in Umbria altogether. And to those of you a bit unfamiliar, DOC, I'm referring to the classification system, the quality standard system in Italy, beginning with Vino di Tavola and moving to IGT, DOC, and DOCG. So it's a tiered system of quality, DOCG being the apex, of course. So Lungarotti created that. But tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about Montefalco, and that's right in the center. And Montefalco is a special place, and as the other two regions that I mentioned are really, synonymous with a particular name. Excuse me, I don't mean to obscure my screen. Pardon me just a moment. Just getting some notes in front of me. Montefalco is synonymous with the Caprai family, Arnaldo Caprai. And, when we talk about the history of Sagrantino, the grape itself, the base of the word is sagra or sagro, which means a festival, event, which is rumored to be, that's kind of where that grape came from. Or it could possibly be in reference to the sacrament. But back in the days of really, there's really no, I did a fair amount of research on Sagrantino just for this. And there's a lot of proclamations, but very little like dates and evidence to back it up. Certainly Sagrantino being around in the Middle Ages, but I saw no documents referenced. The only one that I did come across was the National Wine Fair in Tuscany in 1898. The Sagrantino, its sweet version, won an award in the province of Bevara. And that's how Sagrantino was made back in the days, sweet. And when I say made sweet back in the days, that's right up until the 1960s in Italy. Sagrantino was primarily a sweet wine. People did make it dry, they did ferment it dry, but it wasn't known for its qualities fermented dry. I think that has to do with a popularity of sweet wines in the 1970s and 80s and so, but also has to do with fermentation science actually making it to the region and where they get the information in order to understand how to fully ferment these sugars dry and so on and so forth. But Arnaldo Caprai, the Caprai family, really important. 1971, when they arrived, there was a little bit less than about 12 hectares of Sagrantino around at all, just a little bit less. And Arnaldo Caprai bought up most of it. And him, along with the Andante family and the Pellini family, they were the ones to revitalize Sagrantino and basically learned how to ferment it dry. And in 1971, they began an experimental production of Sagrantino di Secco, dry Sagrantino. And it was a part of a larger Umbrian governmental body that were developing how to ferment this wine fully dry. And Arnaldo was a key in the development of the DOC in Montefalco in 1979. And when his son took over in 1988, Sagrantino leapt forward considerably because young Marco Caprai reached out to the University of Milan to a very, very important scientist by the name of Attilio Scienza, and immediately began work, an in-depth analysis into the mother plants of Sagrantino, and to clonal research and massal selection and all these, and isolating the different clones of Sagrantino. He began to walk at the direction of Attilio Scienza. He began to walk the vineyards, all these old vineyards in and around Montefalco and the town of Bevagna, as well as the town of Gualdo Catania, and talking to old winemakers, talking to the old timers, saying, where's the best Sagrantino, and being pointed to these vineyards, to this, and pulling cuttings and bringing that back to the University of Milan, and beginning massal selection, which is a very important process in really isolating the characteristics of Sagrantino that you want in your vineyard, as opposed to the vineyards in the other provinces who need other characteristics that can be isolated with their own massal selections. And Marco Caprai did this, and he, in 1992, Montefalco was raised to DOCG, and that was largely due to the efforts of Marco Caprai. There are very few stories in Italy where a single family can really take claim to the revitalization of a single grape. And the Caprai family were the ones to do that. And yeah, I got some other things to say, but this is not a Umbria class, so. Welcome, Alessandro, ciao.
Ciao, everybody. Bye. How is everything?
There's lots of clapping going on and
Oh,
thumbs up. You have some happy people here, Alessandro.
Alessandro, piacere di vederti.
Ciao.
Grazie.
Grazie a voi. Thank you.
Good. Good. All right, Pietro, you want to talk a little bit about how Sagrantino got to the United States? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
I'm not totally sure either.
They don't even know how it got to Italy.
Yeah, like you mentioned, its history as a dry red wine is not very long. The first cuttings that I know of came in probably about 2004. Actually, it's not true. I know that Randall Graham of Bonnie Doon brought some cuttings in to Tracy Hills out by Stockton. I made our first Sagrantino from those grapes in 2010. And I was talking to the vineyard manager about them, and he said he didn't know what the hell this stuff was. But it was very virused, did not grow very well. And unlike normal Sagrantino, it had paper thin skins and very little tannin. But after several years of growing Sagrantino, it definitely was a type of Sagrantino that is growing out there. At the same time, a guy named Ridgely Evers, who owns Devero up in Dry Creek, I believe he planted suitcase clones of Sagrantino, which you're not supposed to do these days, just
what
because you bring in cuttings from the Italy, in this case, Umbria.
You steal cuttings.
Well, you borrow them. It's a very noble pursuit. But the issue is you can bring in viruses with those cuttings, and then they can infect your vineyard, then the nearby vineyards. And there's a lot of red blotch and things like that that have spread because of that. But I think the first actual bottlings of Sagrantino in the United States labeled Sagrantino were in 2008, simultaneously from those two vineyards. The interesting thing is that any plant material that you plant in a vineyard is supposed to go through Foundation Plant Services, which is they basically culture all these things and make sure that they're virus free, and then they sort of put them out for sale in conjunction with the people who propagate the vines. And that way you can be assured somewhat that it's clean genetic material. There's only one type of Sagrantino that is certified in the United States, and it was actually, they thought it was Sangiovese back in the 1990s. It was brought in with the big Calatal push in the early 1990s. I believe Pepe brought it in, and they realized later that it wasn't Sangiovese at all, and it certainly wasn't growing like Sangiovese. They look kind of similar, but Sagrantino is much more aggressive in the vineyard.
Yeah.
So it was reclassified as Sagrantino down the road. And that's the type we planted because it's technically the only one that's not legally, but the only clean genetic material you can get at this point in the US. But there are several different clones of Sagrantino, and the different regions have sort of a different stylistic fingerprint. And part of that's related to the type, the biotype that's growing in those specific areas. So Sagrantino's history is not very long in the US at all. I mean, it's a wine that almost vanished off the earth in 1970. So interest is going to be limited. But when a lot of these Italian wines made it over, kind of corresponding with the food revolution of the 1990s, it really opened a lot of people's eyes. And like Paul was saying, a lot of people, their introduction to Sagrantino was either Capri or another producer called Palobea, who's a little bit on the more natural, slightly wild side, but again, very passionate, beautiful wines, just a little bit of a different register with them.
I'm kind of surprised that Sagrantino made it over here at all, just because there's only literally 12 to 14 hectare available in Umbria.
Yeah.
Of 1971, that was it.
It must have just impressed enough people to grab a little bit of a toehold. And now there are probably I think I saw 120 acres planted in the US, and that's spread out. There's some in Sonoma County, actually a few blocks in Sonoma County. Several people in Dry Creek are growing it. There's some in the Sierra foothills. I have a friend up there who just put in a vineyard of it. Paso, there's some down outside of San Diego in Temecula.
Yep.
It's a grape that's fairly hardy. It can take a good amount of heat. I wouldn't say that it likes it scorching hot. I think it's in that middle zone. I think it's more adaptable than Sangiovese to warmer climates, but maybe not quite as much as Aglianico. But
does it have more natural acidity than Sangiovese? Because I know that Sagrantino is imbued with at least like 5 or 6 on the scale of acidity.
Yeah, and Sagrantino, as a grower, the issue with Sagrantino is, well, you have 3 things. You have a wall of tannin, and you're trying to judge when it's matured enough to be able to pick. But even when it's mature enough to pick, it's still a wall of tannin that never quite goes away. And it's fine-grained noble tannin, but it's a face full of tannin. That's
the highest. I think the highest of all Italian red grapes and isothionins. Yeah, it's the highest.
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's the darkest, but all those phenolic compounds, like it's very, very rich in those. Small berries, big seeds, thick skins. At the same time, it's hanging on to acidity, but the one really critical thing with Sagrantino is that it develops a ton of sugar and a ton of alcohol, consequently. The way it grows in the vineyard, you have a cane and you have leaves kind of alternating along it. And sometimes with vigorous vines, you have a cane, and then you have something called a lateral, which is like a small cane branching off at 90-degree angles. And then you'll have a few leaves on that. And that usually means that you need to balance your vine a little bit, maybe not give it water. But Sagrantino naturally produces those. And it's the only grape I've ever seen that will have a cane and then a lateral, and then the lateral will have a lateral. And they're closely clustered leaves the whole way. And the leaves are basically, the sugar comes from photosynthesis. So you've got all this leaf area, and it's a grape that a month before it's ripe, I know ours is already at 13.5% alcohol, and it's still green seeds. You know, it's clearly not even close to being picked. So you're kind of, it's a foot race between tannin, the acid level, and then trying to keep the alcohol from going crazy. Or you just embrace it and make a 16% wine and exacerbate those aromatics and stuff. But I've never seen, it's the only grape I've ever worked with that's like that. It's just so big. And actually this year I experimented with cutting off a lot of those laterals and pulling every third leaf and things like that, just to try to choke it back a bit.
Will you mind painting a little bit of a clearer picture when you're talking about laterals and about kind of the way this looks literally on the vine?
Yeah, I wish I had, I should have sent you a couple of pictures.
Start talking. Let me see if I can find something.
Yeah, but the Sagrantino it has very densely packed leaves, and they're very thick, and they have a really hairy underside, which again, I haven't seen in any other grapevine like this. Very thick, vigorous canes, but really what we call internodes, which is the distance between each leaf. So some types of Sangiovese, you'll get 6 to 8 inches, and there'll be a leaf, and then another leaf going down, then another one going up. Sagrantino will be literally every 1.5 inches, leaf, 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 with these incredibly bushy canopies. And you can find videos on YouTube of, who's the guy in Colleodole that I like?
Milziadi-Antano?
Yeah, Milziadi-Antano.
Love the producer.
Kind of clearing these leaves away and talking about it, just how vigorous it is. But you also don't want to expose the grapes to too much sun, and then you just get kind of bland, jammy wine. So it's a balancing act with Sagrantino that's really kind of fascinating. And for my own just experience with it, it's kind of an adventure grape for me, because I drove up to Eastern Washington to go pick up the vines, because it was the only place in the US I could get them. Planted 500 of them in 2012. The wine that you have in front of you from Prima Materia, that is 1 barrel from 2015, which was our first harvest, 1 barrel 2016, and 1 barrel 2017. So out of 500 vines, we're barely getting a barrel. And now production is all the way up to maybe 2 barrels in a good year. So even though they're really vigorous vines, they're not heavy croppers, which is another reason that it's very robust. You know, you have a lot of foliage going into very few grapes. And it's been a really interesting thing to grow. And the wine has changed dramatically for me. This one that you have in front of you is definitely lighter than the other one, definitely less tannin, definitely a little more high toned. I just bottled the next round of Sagrantino last Friday, and it's darker, it's heavier, it has aromatic, it's got that roasted herb stuff. It's like throwing a bundle of thyme on the grill along with all that cherry syrup. Like it's going someplace, it's going, as the vines mature, it's becoming much more feral, which is exactly what I was hoping it would do, and more black cherries coming in. But then just the wall of tannin. Over the last couple of years, that tannin has, I don't know if it has to do with the root depth or what, but the tannin is now on. It's just like, it's pretty much like the fungally.
Yeah, you know, and you would be able to clear this up, but you know, I've heard from several winemakers, and always in Italy and always in Barolo, but about the physiological life cycle of tannin within the vine itself, and when that kind of comes to maturity, and focus less on ripeness and more on that, you'll have a more balanced wine.
Yeah, well, with these tannin-driven grapes, I would put Ionico in the same category to an extent. You almost don't even worry about the fruit, because tannin is sort of the defining factor, and it definitely takes front stage on the tactile side. You're just kind of trying to get everything in line behind that with harvest. So
let's talk a little bit about where your vines are real quick.
Yeah, so we're up in Lake County, which is just north of Napa. Touches both Mendocino and Sonoma County. It's kind of the forgotten fourth county of the square up there. But it's starting to really produce some good wines, and there's a lot of vineyard planting going on. The altitude pretty much starts at about 1,300 feet for grape growing. We're at 1,450 approximately, and goes all the way up to 3,000 feet. People are exploring even a little bit higher than that, but winter comes early. It freezes pretty hard up there, so we'll see how high we can really go and still get things right before the snow comes. And we're located in sort of in the central area in between the lake and then the Mayacamas Mountains, which sort of run the spine through, Napa, Sonoma, and up into Mendocino. If you drive up Napa Valley heading towards Calistoga, they're the mountains on your left. And we're about a mile from the run out of the Mayacamas heading east. And then we have a 4,600 foot volcano about 2 miles away, which defines the other side of that boundary. And that last exploded about 11,000 years ago. So it's actually one of the most dangerous volcanic fields in the US, according to geologists. Still very active with high explosion potential.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of exciting. So very mixed soils where we are, a good amount of rock, some clay from, sort of eruptive runoff. We're near a big body of water, but we're out of there's sort of a low-lying sink effect that it has, but we're up out of that by about 100 feet. So we're kind of transitional between Mayacamas, real hillside, and then more flat land. About a mile from us around the lake, that's where all the Sauvignon Blanc and Merlot and lots of other things that like a little more cooler and a little richer soil grow. But on the vineyard map here, the very bottom left hand, I think that's an N, that's the Sagrantino. 500 vines, so not much, but it takes a lot of, they're very vigorous. It takes a lot of work, several passes to keep everything clear and open and under control. We had a lot of frost this year too, so have to re-prune things next year a little bit. But it doesn't harvest particularly late, certainly not as late as Ionico. After Sangiovese, but not horribly, which is good because you can usually safely get it in before rain or snow. So, but it does bud out pretty early. That makes it susceptible to those early spring freezes. And it's fairly, doesn't need a ton of water either. It's one of those vines that you can tell it has a long history. It's kind of adaptable. It's sort of a survivor. Doesn't need a whole, even though we do a lot in the vineyard with it, it's pretty durable on its own. It's like Ionico. You can tell that it's something that's been around for a while.
Right on. It's
not one of those super finicky things that's in the wrong place all the time.
Yeah, Nebbiolo, Pinot Noir,
Ugh.
Some of these super finicky, Sangiovese to a certain respect. Yeah, these are hard, not hardy grapes. These are finicky, delicate little.
And this is part of that funny, sort of dialogue between growing French varietals and then Italian. Just the Italian ones are so much more, and it's not that they're, just Cabernet is easy to grow, man. That is the easiest grape.
Easy to grow, yeah.
Sauvignon Blanc's pretty easy. Chardonnay is pretty easy. But these Italian grapes are very particular. They come from specific places and specific climates. So they have sort of a narrow range of preference, I guess, that we're just starting to figure out now.
Cool. Should we get into glass one here, into Pietro's wine, talk a little bit about what's in the glass? Please feel free to unmute. Thank you all for that. Let's go around a little bit. Who would like to start us off? Or I can.
Why don't you start us off so we know what we're supposed to say?
Oh gosh, now, Lisa, that's dangerous language for those of you here that have been to my classes. Mary's got a big smile on her face right now. I don't allow such things. I think it's if I say something, it's easy for everyone to get their nose in the glass and go, "Oh, I get that too." If it's all right with you, Lisa, I'd love to finish with me. But
Okay, we can do that too.
yeah, I'd love to hear some thoughts with wine one. Definitely a cleaner, lighter, slightly more nuanced expression. We're not at 11 with Fongoli. We're slightly turned down a little bit less. But what do we think of this wine?
I wasn't getting, you talked up the funk of the Italian, but I thought Pietro's tasted, smelled kind of funky too.
Yeah.
In the best way.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, mine usually take about an hour to defunk.
I think funk will.
We opened these about 45 minutes ago, both of them.
Okay, that should be just about right.
And they, we've sipped from them both. We must confess, but I don't know. Maybe Pietro's is a little fruitier, perhaps.
Yeah, a little bit more fruit forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting kind of dark fruits, but for me, Sagrantino is always kind of a bramble. So I get like red fruits. I get a little bit of black fruits. Believe it or not, I get like a little bit of blue in there. There's always kind of a mix. Like Zinfandel has that, whereas Pinot is pretty strictly red, or Nebbiolo, things like that. Anyone else?
That bramble? I like the way it ends on my tongue. It's nice.
At risk of saying not what Paul said, but what Pietro said, like it was cool hearing the story about the high alcohol and the wall of tannins. This one, we also indulged in both of them before because we lack self-control, but it was great. It definitely had some of the alcohol and like the sugar that was mentioned, but it felt like a very like crisp and contemporary representation of the Italian one.
Yeah, I agree. This Pietro's has a polished feel to it. I don't think you can escape the funk with Sagrantino. There's like to me, the fruit is on the front of my palate, but there's always like a background of like herbs and spices and maybe a little cigar box back there. And I think that's just comes with Sagrantino. But I agree, Julian. It's got like a cleaner, a little bit more fruit forward feel to it.
You can feel the sweet history of it, like where it was sweet. You kind of get that in the sip. Like it's not sweet, but you can feel that it kind of could have been.
You can feel why it gravitates towards sweet for all those years. Yeah, I agree. And I'll tell you, folks, Sagrantino Passito is sexy stuff. It's hard to find, but it is just downright sexy. And you want to have like dark chocolate and dessert that are like more cake driven. So, like more, a little bit something for your palate to hold on to. They can be pretty intense. That tannin does not go away with the sweet wine. It remains. It's the only sweet wine I've ever come across where that's happened.
I hope you're looking for some.
Yes, ma'am. Don't you worry, Mary.
Some, right?
I'm on it.
Oh, you're on it. Good.
So, Paul, for the California one, I don't feel like it's as funky as the Italian one.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, it just has that super strong alcohol scent, but then it has like this really pretty floral that follows it that is unexpected, and when I first get the whiff of the alcohol, I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be really, really strong. And then it follows up with this really floral bouquet in it, and it's not stinky.
Yeah, it's a little bit cleaner. I agree. I think, whenever you taste Sagrantino, there's always going to be this kind of aggression to it. On the nose, kind of the alcohol, be it alcohol or be it earth driven, there's always going to be something. It's going to jump out at the glass, I think, more than pretty much any other red grape out there, save for Nerello Mascalese in the highest altitudes in Mount Etna in Sicily. But yeah, it doesn't have the funk that the Fongoli has. But Pietro mentioned Paolo Bea, producer in Umbria, and the last name is BEA. And if you can get your hands on those wines, I applaud you for it. I find them to be rather overpriced nowadays. But he was kind of the grandfather of the natural wine movement in central Italy. And Fongoli is a descendant of that movement. Almost identical ways of making wine between those two producers, although Fongoli kind of pulls back on maceration and aging, but still complete biodynamic approach, complete natural approach to winemaking. I think this is a good time, Pietro, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about, I mean, I can talk about biodynamics in philosophy and the 9 preparations and all that stuff, but what's the difference between your Sagrantino in the glass, the way you make it, and a stone cold, badass, biodynamic, take it to the limits, no sulfur added producer like Fongoli? Bring it.
In spirit or execution?
A little bit of both, man.
Yes.
I think Sagrantino is a grape that definitely, to achieve its potential, I think biodynamic is probably a great way to go with it. Inevitably, I find that, and I'm not one of those hippie guys, but the biodynamic wines, they have more minerality, they have a little more zip, a little more of a spine, a little more verticality to them.
Energy, yeah, I read it always.
Yeah. There's just, it's like words for snow. Might need 14 more to really describe things accurately, but there's something to it that works. There may be other systems that work too, I don't know. But because it's such a big grape, and I think it could be, I'm not sure that expressive is the right word with it. There's something about it where it almost doesn't want to be expressive. It almost wants to sort of hold everything in a ball and make you work at it. But I think vineyard practices would probably, just for my own winemaking, this first bottling of it, fairly happy with it, but it didn't have the sort of pushing at the seams that a lot of the ones that I do like from Umbria have. So in the one I just bottled, co-fermented a little bit of dried white grapes in it and a little bit of air-dried Cabernet Franc, just to sort of pad around the edges and to make sure that there's a little floral bump in there and a little more on the leathery side, which I like. So the paradigm that I think Fongoli is working with is actually the style that I would prefer.
Spontaneous yeast, spontaneous fermentation.
Yeah, and using natural fermentations too. That means, again, that's going to be a foot race with the tannin. Those fermentations take longer to finish. Yeah. So, you got to really, really be on top of that.
Yeah, especially with all that sugar. I mean, even if you have ripe grapes, I mean,
for us, I'm putting heaters on the bins. I'm putting hot water bottles in there. I'm doing everything to get those yeast to finish that last 1% of alcohol, because they're tired, man. They want to go to sleep for the winter. Yeah. So it ends up being a 30-day fermentation. Right. A pretty long time on all that tannin. Fortunately, it's good tannin.
One of the differences, Pietro ages his Sagrantino. What's the size of your barrels?
Just regular barrique.
225-liter barrels. So he ages them in barrique, which are 225-liter barrels. They're smaller. You can kind of put your arms around them if you're standing tall. They're known as barrique, which is French for bent by fire. And to make those barrels, you have to toast the insides in order to actually close the staves and put the hoops on and actually make the barrel. Fongoli's barrels are cask. They're called tini, and in that area, and they're large botti barrels, and where you're standing and you're about halfway. They're very big barrels, and those are steam bent over the process of a number of days, how to make those. So there's no actual toasting going on those barrels. So you have a real neutral barrel. But with Pietro's barrels, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you use mostly used barrels, almost all,
they're
right?
about 10 to 15 years old.
So you're seeking that neutral, that kind of neutral thing. So when a barrel's being used, you know, over 3 to 4 times, 3 to 4 seasons, it's rendered neutral. So it will really give very little onto the wine, very little of that spice, very little of that, you know, tannin. It acts more as a shaping element to the wine, from what I know. And Pietro, feel free, please.
Purely a vessel. I will use barrels with thinner staves so that there's a little more oxygen exchange going on to help with that tannin.
Okay.
But I'm not trying to add anything to the flavors of the wine.
Yeah.
With those.
Yeah, I've met producers in Barolo who request their staves to be 2 or 3 times as thick because they want to do the opposite of what Pietro's trying to do. They want a real slow micro oxygenation. So oxygen is a very powerful thing when it comes to winemaking.
Yeah, and with those big barrels, you basically have to figure on more time in them, but it preserves the sort of the harder soul of the wine a little more in its natural state, I think.
And if you folks are conceptualizing this aging process, think about smaller barrels so you have less volume of wine, so more of your wine is touching wood. When you have larger casks, or botti, as I lovingly love to call them, you have much more volume of wine, so less of your wine is touching wood.
Yeah. And a lot of producers will use a combination of both as well.
Yep. Yeah, like a regimen. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can get a little bit of that shaping, a little bit of that kind of finesse, but then still have some of the more primal elements in the blend.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Pietro, I really like your wine, man. It has really nice mid-palate, and the acidity is just pouring off my lips. That kind of mouth-watering feeling when I'm drinking Pietro's wine, it's always at the tip of my lips, and it's just kind of spilling over, which tells me I want a burger with onions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some pork shoulder.
Yeah, Sagrantino makes you hungry.
Onions. What's that?
Sagrantino makes you hungry.
Yeah.
That's one of the good things about it.
Yeah. I remember when I tasted the Fungoli, my rep about 2 weeks ago gave me a bottle, and I brought it home and drank a glass on an empty stomach.
Oh.
It was a bad idea. Oh, I felt it in my whole body. Oh.
The Fungoli, when we started drinking it, because we did our homework, we're very diligent, and so we opened the wines up early and have been sipping them with dedication, I'll say.
Yeah.
The Fungoli, my takeaway was it reminded me of an old library. It was like musty books and cigars and a little bit of barnyard, and then that kind of like melodic fruit kind of in the middle.
Well said, Lisa.
Oh, Aminta. But
Aminta, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Pleasure to meet you.
Sorry,
My
Aminta.
name's not up there.
Pardon me, I got it wrong.
No problem. And then he was saying, really, was it plum skins you were tasting?
On Pietro's wine, yeah, like really predominant, like plum skin and maybe a little bit of sour cherry. Yeah.
But we just love how just drinkable this Sagrantino is. I just drinking a bottle slowly through the course of a meal is just always a delight.
I agree. Does anyone else feel the evolution of this wine or both of these wines from when you opened it to when you're drinking it now? 'Cause I think both evolve a lot. I know the Fungoli for me takes kind of a leap. At some point in the first like 25 or 30 minutes, it like leaps somewhere into a ball.
When we first opened it, kind of danced all over your tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Little alive.
And then it seems like it settles down a little bit and kind of figures out where it wants to be, and then it smooths out a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's interesting.
I agree. I think that Pietro, the Prima Materia, after opening it, not really the acidity tannin, a lot of alcohol, but it seems like there's very mild in terms of complexity, body, not a particularly difficult wine to drink. So I think I picture it beautifully with appetizer, with cheese and a little bit of crackers, bread. So in talking, it's a very talkative wine, like great, I think, as an opening in the evening. But I'll say 1 hour later, the body is actually now coming up, and it's increasing in complexity. So, and it's getting
it evolves with the evening. With
yeah,
the
a lot more complex in terms of flavor. So it's actually a great bottle to go through slowly, if you can make it slowly. It's too good.
If you can manage.
Yeah.
Well said, Salvo. Well said.
Yeah, I think a lot of these big Italian reds. Ooh, I'm sorry. I think they lend themselves to slow.
We were able to enjoy it with Alejandro's lasagna, the short-lived rib lasagna, and so I always like to have a tannin wine with meat. Somehow that animal fat and the wine somehow is so satisfying.
It's like a sponge. The wine is like a sponge. It just soaks up like savory, that oil, that fat. Yeah.
And the only thing I would ask is the bottle there's no vintage on it. So I'm wondering what year he produced it. And
I think he said, it was a year. Go ahead.
Oh, and what a wonderful thing it is to drink from one barrel, from 1 year, from one hillside. To have that experience of. It's very unique. Not many people in this world will be able to drink this wine tonight. It's wonderful.
That's true.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it to our home.
Thank you, Pietro. Pietro, tell us the vintages again are in there.
1 barrel from 2015, 1 from 2016, and 1 from 2017.
Amazing.
Okay, it said 1 barrel on the label.
Yeah.
3 barrel. No, let's put 3 barrel into your eloquent statement, please.
Very simple.
Right on.
But I think it kind of comes through in the wine. I think there is like a sense of freshness and fruit on one end, but then you get a little bit of that more aged, a little more sort of like red velvet-ish, a little more oxygen exposure, sort of rounding out the back end. So sometimes the non-vintage thing, it's not something I like to do, but sometimes there can be practical reasons to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know we kind of look sideways at it, but it is an option.
There's a producer in Sicily by the name of Calabretta. Salvo, am I saying that right? Calabretta.
Perfect.
Yeah. And they do a non-vintage red that they refer to as Cala Cala, which is per Italiano means gulp, right? Like Cala Cala is gulp gulp.
Cala Cala. Yeah, it flows down very fast, very quickly.
Fast. And dangerous wines, by the way. And yeah, he uses a mixture of different vintages, and I'm always impressed with his wines. Yeah.
I think Sean Thackeray's Pleiades is another a regular non-vintage red. That's this and that from a dash here, sort of the artist's approach to it.
Yeah, and they're doing it in Australia as well. Funny enough, Sagrantino is grown in Australia.
Oh yeah, I was going to mention that.
In McLaren Vale, Barossa Valley, Hunter Valley, Eden Valley.
Yeah, and Texas.
What?
Some ended out in hill country.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I loved it.
Sagrantino in Texas. All right.
Sorry, it's still made in America.
I have had these wines open since 5 o'clock. And it's been really, really interesting from the first smell. And when I opened the Fongoli, it was like, oh, wow, And then I was sipping them through this other Zoom thing I had to go to. So I'm kind of getting to know them, and and I love this intensity, of the grape. You know me, Paul. It's like That's what I really go for, the punch. And I found that Pietro's wine is definitely more elegant. And if I had someone to dinner who didn't know a lot about wine, and these were the wines I had, I would serve them Pietro's wine. But the second one, I have to say, and this is just me, it's just a person, I just love that pow and that grip and that ongoing fight in the mouth and deliciousness. And I haven't eaten beef in 4 years, but I am dying for a bistecca alla Fiorentina.
I don't have one in my freezer, Mary, or else I'd run down and bring it to you. Buono.
100%.
Grazie, Mary.
I love it.
Grazie, grazie.
Yeah.
Hey, Virginia and Francis. So these two were great clients of Alessandro's at a restaurant in San Francisco called Chiaroscuro that I had a pleasure of being a part of for about 4 years. And these guys are all about the food and the wine pairing together. So I'm curious, guys, which is the best with which? Putting you right on the spot.
I prefer Pietro's.
Pietro's? Huh?
Yeah, it was more approachable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you guys were talking about the funk, and we were on mute, thank God. But I was like, what do they mean by the funk? Like, I don't get it. What's the funk? And so he was telling me a little bit about like what specifically he was smelling, and then that helped me understand it a little bit more.
Sure.
But for me, I preferred Pietro's.
Pietro's. What did you guys have to eat?
We had Alessandro's meal.
Did you have the whole meal?
Whole meal.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, really good. So, I mean, it really worked out. You know, we
so
started
elegant.
with wine. It worked really well with the what was that? The tart appetizer with squash, right? Butternut squash worked really well with that.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, autumnal kind of that butternut squash and that autumn flavors in the Sagrantino. I absolutely see that.
I really enjoyed the fungoli with the lasagna.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Virginia liked Pietro's wine, I think, for the whole meal.
Yeah.
I
The
think
whole meal, right across.
the fungoli didn't really just work with you. Like there was something funky about it that she didn't like.
I didn't say funky.
There it is.
But I thought the fungoli worked really well with the lasagna. I mean, that lasagna had everything I liked in it. You know, short rib, truffle, mushrooms, pasta.
You're a complicated man, Francis. You're a complicated man.
Mac and cheese on drugs. I mean, with the this work for me.
I don't think Alessandro's paying attention right now. But,
I'm here listening because I'm cleaning my place.
yeah, after all those orders.
But yeah, I'm listening.
Wow, good. Thank you for your feedback, guys. Always valuable.
Your food, Alessandro, together with Paul's explanation of the wines and offering of the wines, and it just brought us back to 5-10 years ago when we would be at Chiaroscuro. So thank you for this experience, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Good.
Cheers.
Buono. Cheers. Thank you.
It brought us back to 10 months ago when we had a life and we could go do this in person and do a wine tasting with food. So thank you for bringing it to us via Zoom and Alessandro and delivered to our doorstep.
My pleasure.
Given the response from today's tasting, I think you all may see this happening on a bit more of a regular basis. I think people are very excited and yeah. So yeah, a lot more to come, to be sure. I just want to tell a quick thing. I maybe it's selfish of me, but right after I became certified as a sommelier about 9 years ago, my first wine experience was an interview for a job for a company called the Mirabel Hotel Group in Carmel by the Sea. And they had a property up in Yachtville known as Continente Piero, which is now, I think, owned by, Richard Reddington or somebody up there. But, and I distinctly recall going in, they set me up in a beautiful room in their beautiful bed and breakfast, the Auberge de Soleil, and had nice dinner. And my interview was myself, the wine director, and Marco Caprai of Arnaldo Caprai.
Wow.
And his lineup of wines going back to the mid-1990s. And I realized about 20 minutes into this that I wasn't really going to have an interview. This was my interview, me just drinking with these guys. So I took it upon myself to do all the wine service for all 6 hours of that evening, decanting and pouring and all that, because I needed to show off my stuff, something. But that was my first job experience as a sommelier, was with Marco Caprai and him talking about the birth of Sagrantino and about his dad, Arnaldo, in creating that DOC. And he was very humble. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
I'll tell you all that. Sagrantino's got a little place in my heart, however funky, stinky it is.
Paul, can I ask you a question about this this Marco Caprai that you've referred to as the person who revived the grape? So we were in Umbria, 3 years ago, and we went to Antonelli, a winery there, and what is their relationship to this story? Because we heard a kind of a similar story from them. Are they kind of stealing the story? Or are they the same organization, or what is the deal?
You know, it's tough. And I know Antonelli. I've had their wines, and I know you'll go on their site and they'll say we were the first ones to do Sagrantino. This is something I come across a lot in Italy. I try and look for patterns in my education when it comes to this, and the Arnaldo Caprai family is just across the board and recognized. Antonelli family I just don't come across their name very much in my research with Janice Robinson, Ian D'Agata, Tom Hyland, Ken Vastola, like all the people that I reach out to here in the United States. I don't think that they're connected as families, but I'm sure that to say that one family were the only ones to be making a dry Sagrantino back in the 60s, I can't imagine that to be true. I'm sure there were several other families doing it, but no one took it, no one brought it to the University of Milan, no one spent time locating cuttings and creating a Massal selection, all this stuff. I think it was the Caprai family that did that. And that's a lot of work, and it costs a lot of money to do that, to commission these studies to this university. So yeah, I've had Antonelli wines before, and I think they're lovely. But that's all that's my answer. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for the answer, and I'm certainly not like suggesting that they're right or something like that. It was just funny, how similar the stories were.
Very similar. You know, I come across a story in Tuscany between the producer, the family of the Biondi Santi family in Montalcino, and the Castellari family in Chianti. And they both lay heavy claim to Sangiovese. And in that regard, I have no idea who is like the original, who like spent the most amount of time, who isolated the most, all this. So even in the blue chip stuff, there's still kind of like a, what the hell? who really did this? Yeah, I will say that Sagrantino, despite the fact that there's not a lot of documentation on where it comes from, it's mentioned in, like, when people talk about Galliopo in Calabria, when people talk about Sangiovese in Tuscany, people talk about Grechetto and Vernaccia. These are a special group of the 3,000 grapes that Italy is known to have, for over 400 in production today or something like that. There is a very small group that people really believe were born on the shores of Italy. Didn't come from Greece, didn't come from Eastern Europe, really born in Italy. And Sagrantino is rumored to be one of them. So.
It's very interesting. You know, Ian D'Agata writes about it, in his books, the Sagrantino grape. But if you go back to Marcella Hazan, the Italian cookbook author, her husband Victor wrote a book on Italian wines, and if you look in there, it's barely mentioned.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Barely mentioned. So
Yeah.
things have changed so very much. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I have an oddball question. I don't know, given this is a group. Seems to me it was about a year ago, we were having a very happy evening at Olivetto's, eating truffles.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the date. Isn't this truffle season?
Yep.
What's happened? Does anybody know?
I don't know. I haven't really read up on it, and I'm neglecting my duties as a Cavalieri member. Not looking at the truffles.
Maybe a little truffle dinner, Alessandro?
Oh, is that what you're saying? Oh, if
I don't know. Truffle and wine.
That's
It's
my
winter.
part,
It's
actually.
COVID.
Hold
These
on.
lovely
Let me
people
mute Alessandro.
tomato,
Hold on.
you know, it's
Give
like-
me a moment. Let me mute Alessandro. Okay. If you guys want truffles, that's no problem. That's no problem. White truffles are no problem. I have a very nice Alessandro, and I have a very nice connection. Ilari in Urbani. She's getting really good stuff right now from
Oh,
vorrei
mangiare.
Email us if anybody wants truffles.
All right.
But we were talking a little bit about a truffle dinner.
I need it.
It would require you all to be in your kitchens for a short portion of it. Because I think there's going to be some dropping of pasta and water and some emulsifying in the pan. So it may be a bit more of an involved. We'll figure it out, but we will do truffles. It means everyone has to get a truffle shaver. So put your orders in now. Truffle shavers are hard to find the closer you get to Christmas.
You know, it's.
I will not pre-shave it. I won't do it.
and a good wine.
Yes. Good Barolo. Yes.
Yes.
For sure.
Oh, mamma mia.
Anyone have any other questions on Sagrantino or thoughts for Mr. Pietro, the real mind here?
I have, or like just noticing again, like the comment about the high sugars that it gets, and seeing that on the Fangoli, it's 16% alcohol, which is insane.
Are you feeling it? I mean, not feeling it, but like when you're tasting it, is it the alcohol like driving the bus? Because for me, it wasn't.
For me, it's less. Much less.
I was so shocked that it was 16%. But yeah, I don't normally have wine that high in the percentages, and so I can't even remember the last time I had 16. Like, is that like usual?
Up there, man. That's up there. Yeah, for sure. And if I could urge those of you that are able to show any restraint at all this evening, and for those of you that got food, I understand if you can't, but to save a little bit of your Sagrantino for tomorrow. Put a cork in the bottle and to save a little bit of a taste tomorrow, just to see how it is tomorrow. And when we do classes on Nebbiolo or tastings on Nebbiolo and stuff, this will be a big factor. But it's always interesting to taste an Italian wine at day 2.
All right.
I got it.
Oops.
Good.
Got it.
Do that.
Cool.
So can I ask a question? So about the difference. So there's also a big difference between the age, right? Of these two wines. One is 2012, and the other one is 2016 average, I think. And then the difference in altitude. I don't know, because there's a lot of lakes, so a lot of water, maybe a little bit of a higher humidity, while Umbria is pretty dry overall, I think. And so do you, how do age and climate contribute to the difference between these two wine, besides just the region or the production per se?
I'm gonna give this. I'm gonna let Pietro take this question because he knows much more about it. But I just want to give a little bit of clarity. So Fangoli wines, entirely biodynamically made, spontaneous yeasts on the grapes and in the cellar. That's what they allow fermentation to occur. fermentation occurs, and then the wine gets transferred over to large casks where it's aged for between 8 to 10 years. Between 8 to 10 years, and then it's further bottle aged, and then it's released onto the market, which is why you're seeing 2012, which is not the current vintage, but I got the last 16 bottles of 2012 in California. So that's the aging regimen with Fongoli. So please, Pietro, take over, man.
Yeah, I actually think that where we are in Lake County, I have not been to Umbria, so I can't speak from experience, but I know it's generally up in that 300, 400 meter or higher elevation. I know that there are going to be somewhat volcanic soils up there that are similar. I've seen pictures where they seem to be pretty high iron content with the same red earth with some clay in the mix that we have in Lake County. I actually think that it is possibly surprisingly similar between the two. And actually Lake County is very low humidity. I would say an average day in summer is 15%, maybe 10. We never get fog. Too many mountains in between the coast and where we are. I think the main difference, I don't know what the origin of the clone we have in the US is. So I don't know if it would correspond to the area. But I think it's just the age of the vines is sort of coming through with the lighter, brighter. Because what I just bottled is pretty on par with the Fongoli. It's a lot more black cherry skin. The tan, it has more of that that feral quality to it that I like so much. You know, it's a little bit bursting at the seams. Like there's a, it's like, you shouldn't have had that cigarette, but you did. And now what are you going to do kind of thing? So it just has,
I love how they talk about wine.
It's not as well behaved. I like this first one, and it's kind of nice that it's linear and precise, and with age, those floral elements that Sagrantino has, and I think the Fongoli has it also. It's kind of buried underneath the girth of the wine. But Sagrantino does develop floral stuff as it ages. Those molecules kind of come apart and start to aromatize. And you can that's what's so cool about Sagrantino, and like Nebbiolo, where it's sort of punching you, but at the same time there are all these little flitting bits of beauty in the glass, just kind of wafting through.
Montefalco, or the area where Sagrantino is grown, kind of all around it, there are appellations where Sagrantino becomes more floral. Right around in the center of Montefalco, Sagrantino is at its most structured. But if you travel outside of that into some of the other areas, it can get very, very kind of floral and pretty, which is, I don't think I've ever tasted Sagrantino in my life that was approachable like Pietro's is, and clean and bright, and yeah. I think New World expression of grapes like Sagrantino and Aglianico, there's something there, man. I tasted Aglianico that was super pure as well.
There are a couple of producers that are making more modern, well, like we said, modern style 10 years ago, but it's the modern style that's a little more acid driven, a little less tannin.
Less ripeness.
Lower ripeness, less sugar. Scaccia Diavoli is one of them. And they make a sparkling Sagrantino as well, Method Champenois. That's actually pretty good. It's starting to get good.
I've always seen it. I've never tasted it.
But I think between the clones, between the different areas, the different soil types, there is room for different expressions. And then you have younger producers. Sagrantino 15 years ago was big and over oaked. And it, like everything else, it got popular. It went, through the 90s into the 2000s, and now it's in this sort of diverse and reassessing itself place.
Yeah.
What does the soul look like, kind of thing. So, if I think there are more polished versions out there, if this rougher style isn't necessarily to your liking, I think the grape itself has enough integrity that it can probably bear a little bit of winemaker imprint.
Yeah. I think, if we're looking at the scale of Sagrantino, Paolo Bea for me, is the most aggressive Sagrantino on the market. And then you get to, Scaccia Diavoli, as Pietro mentioned, that's more finesse. But there's one right in the middle, and it's a producer that I've longed to find again, and Pietro mentioned him earlier. But it's got a funny name. It's Milziade Antano. And they're from Colliale, what is it? Colliale Duli?
Yeah, or Colliadole.
Colliadole. Colliale Duli. Wow, that's American right here. But that is a beautiful, very pretty, very polished, almost vertical Sagrantino, which to me, these Tuscan grapes or these Central Italian grapes tend to be wide grapes. And their wines get vertical and bright, and they're cool.
Yeah, that was the best Sagrantino I've had in 3 years. In fact, I have a bottle. They'll probably don't find a time good enough to drink it yet.
What year?
Probably do it soon.
What year?
You can send her on your phone.
Yeah, I'll do a text. You want to send her a text?
I think it's 12, actually.
12? Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Jim and I
there it
have
is.
already texted.
All right. Wait.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, man. Thank you guys. Thank you everyone for coming. This was great. Good discussion.
Super.
And thank you, Alessandro.
Yeah. Thank you, Alessandro, very much for the food.
Yes, thank you, Alessandro.
Folks, stay tuned. I will. I'll put you all on a single email and send you out when we have our proverbial shit together, and have our next tasting. But we're gonna try and sneak in Aglianico in the next 2 weeks, and hopefully Alessandro will put a menu to Aglianico. But that'll be a really fun tasting because I'll likely include so there'll be a 2 or a 3 pack. So we'll have Pietro's awesome Aglianico, and then I'll have one from a biodynamic producer in Campania, and then I'll have also one that's quite serious. It'll be a special bottle, and I'll put together a special price for our tasting for that. And it's from Mastro Berardino, the Radicchi.
Oh.
Aglianico made back, the first vintage was 1927. So crazy old. But that'll be fun. So stay tuned for that stuff. And thank you all so much for coming. Pietro, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Nice to see everybody.
Thank you. Awesome.
Good. All right. Enjoy the weekend, the rest of your weekend, of course. And
Yeah,
happy
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Oh, yes. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you,
Thanksgiving.
Pietro.
Grazie mille.
Ciao.
Oh.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Ciao.